to go live on YouTube.
Okay.
It's being
And do
live.
make it public, no? Can you make it public?
It is public.
Not private. Mm-hmm.
It's fine. No, I think it's best way to go public because private gets too many security parameters are in place, and there's no reason for that.
Okay.
Hold on, because YouTube is it's slowly coming. It's coming. All right. YouTube is trying to. It's slowly.
You know what? I'm gonna take you down to make myself a coffee, because anyway, I'm meeting with Danny and Nick in 10 minutes to go over, the slides and how they're gonna make the presentation and so on, so we can start at 10:30.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
How are we going to? So how are you going to share? How are you going to share this? How are you going to share the YouTube stream with everybody?
Oh, if you can send me the link. Actually, I can hear copy streaming link. So I'm going to. Copy that one and just send it. No.
You have it there. You see.
I have it. Yeah, I have an option to get it.
Let me. You know what? The funny thing is, I haven't live streamed. Okay. Yes, I got that. Okay, great. Oh, I see it up at the top, live on YouTube, right?
Yeah, you see?
Oh, okay, that's perfect. Okay, good.
And I can copy link, so I'm gonna copy.
Oh, copy streaming like that. Jesus.
So I'm going to...
Yeah, okay. I see. Sometimes Zoom does some good stuff,
Exactly. How can we pause live streaming? Yeah, to get it.
You know what? The funny thing is, I haven't tried. Well, listen, there's a button to stop live stream.
Yeah, you see?
But I think that
because the problem is that okay. Because the problem is that live streaming is going to stream everything, even when we meet now in 10 minutes, right? To go over the slides.
That's right.
How can we?
Oh, you know what the funny thing is? I hear it. Hold on, because I have it here playing in the background.
Yeah, I can hear the background. It's the YouTube live stream, no?
That's not gonna. I'm gonna shut that down because if not, it's gonna be confusing. Okay, that's gone. Okay, that's gone. Okay, so we're still active.
Yeah, I think we'll have to come up with a better solution. I don't think this is a good solution.
I don't know. I mean, these other people can't log into the Zoom meeting itself,
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I think that this live on YouTube, this connection, because it's going to directly and immediately connect it to YouTube, even though we don't want that, right? We want to be live. Like we want to generate a link for YouTube that we could promote, but we want to be active at exactly 9:30 Saturday at that time. That's the problem.
Here's my question to you about the YouTube thing, right? The YouTube are you using it as a streaming service so people can watch? Is it going on live, or do you want to have it so that people can go back and watch it?
No, the first one.
A streaming service that's happening live, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so isn't that what's happening now?
Yeah, I mean, in reality, I don't know if you gain really as much as there are difficulties connected to it, So I believe that maybe it would be just better.
Only for a little bit.
You know what? I'll have to just figure it out how to. I'm going to explain that it's a problematic thing to go through because we can only generate a link like literally a couple of minutes before the meeting starts. So I don't see the point of sharing the link a couple of minutes before the meeting. You know what I mean?
So you want to share the link a couple of minutes before the meeting starts? Is that the idea?
No, I'm saying that I don't see the point in that. I don't see the point in sharing the link to YouTube 3 minutes before the meeting, right?
Okay, so what do you want to do then? How do you want to do?
No, I'll just, I'm not going to create any YouTube live. I don't think so. I think
Okay.
it doesn't
So
make really sense, we can
so we
cancel
can
it. And
stop it. So
I'm going to explain.
we can stop the live stream, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna
Or
stop
you
live
know
stream
what?
now. So listen, we're gonna
How
record this. We have videos of these, right? We have videos of this,
yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
can always put them up
Yeah,
on,
exactly.
on
Well,
the
that's
lab's YouTube channel if you want people to go back and watch. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, exactly, exactly. But you know what? I think, are you gonna stay here? You're gonna go back?
oh no, I got a million things to do today. I came here just to start this up.
Okay, okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Which
Then
I'm gonna
yeah,
be
then
doing for
it's
the next 5 Saturdays in a row. So
okay, no problem.
oh, no problem at all. It's great.
I mean, I can start it also.
I'm just kidding.
Or you
Yeah,
can learn, or you can learn something new, and it's going to be very fun.
it's fine. So what do you think? So we'll stop the live stream for now?
Yeah, I think it's a. I mean, um, you know what? I just keep the live stream, and I'm gonna
Listen,
send it
I'll tell you
now. The
what,
link.
let's do this, all right? Let's be smart about it. Let's do this, right? Let the live stream run. See how it works out
Yeah.
for you, okay?
Okay,
If it
exactly.
doesn't work out next time, we don't do it. If it does, then we do it again. But let's see how it works out, all right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, perfect.
Who would you send a link? Who would you send a link to that to? You have a list of people you would send the link to?
I'm going to send to the organizer of the of this Girls in Science platform.
Yeah.
And she would then share it with her group of people. So
listen, do that. On the back end of things, we can look in I can look at the Zoom statistics analytics, and I can see how many people actually joined on YouTube, and you can take it from there, you know?
Okay, perfect.
If you
That
got
would be
3
great.
people joining, maybe it's not, maybe it's not, we don't do this again, but if you got, 25, 30 people joining, then okay, good,
Exactly, exactly. Can you check this later for the back? Can you get
We'll look on the back
statistics?
end, we'll look at, when the meeting ends sometime Monday, I'll look at the analytics.
You can see the statistics. Oh,
I
cool,
can
cool, cool.
see statistics for that, for everything, actually. I can see everything for the meeting. We have an incredible amount of control as the host. We have an incredible amount of control over things.
Okay, all right. Here is the link to YouTube live stream. Okay, best. Okay, send. Good. All right, so this is done. Perfect.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
Everything's running. All right. You have control. You don't have to worry. I mean, you can, when it's over, you can end the meeting if you want. If not, I'll end it later. It's not a big deal. Okay. But as a co-host, you have control. I mean, if you want, I can make you the host of this meeting. Okay. All I need you to do is, once I make you the host, is go back to the participant list and make us a co-host. This way we still have some sort of control. Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay,
I'm
let me
going to make
just
you host
see.
now, because you know what? It gives you all the controls that are available. So let me do that.
Okay.
I'm going to withdraw the
More.
Now here we go. I'm going to make you the host now.
Okay, make me the
You're the
host. You are the host.
Look
Yeah,
at the-
perfect. And then I can make you the host back. I can make you co-host.
Make us a co-host. That's it. Just leave us as a co-host.
Yes, co-host. Okay, we're co-host.
There we go. We got it. That's it. Perfect. That's going to work really well.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Now you have different controls at the bottom of your panel now, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I think. Let me just double check. Yes, I have it actually. Live stop, live stream. I have now live stream also option, so it's really good.
There you go.
Oh my God, this is an evolution. We're getting better and better.
It's always like that. It's always like that.
All right.
All right, listen,
I
have
want
a
to be the
great
last
meeting.
speaker then, when everything's going to be set up.
You'll be fine. Have a good
All
meeting,
right.
and I'll talk to you soon.
Yes.
All right?
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you.
I'll talk to you.
Thank
All
you.
right, take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Have a nice weekend. Bye.
You
Thanks.
too. Bye.
Hello.
Hello. Mhm.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Let's see. Hi, Nick. Hi, Daniel. So yeah, it's 10:30. So do you hear me well? Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So it's 10:30. So I think we'll start maybe in about like 5 to 10 minutes, just so to get more people, plugged in. Usually they're a little bit late, and also we are doing a live stream on YouTube just because some of the people do not have a Zoom platform, so they requested that one. So, but more importantly, we will be recording this one, these workshops, and then we're going to put them on the YouTube channel. So then it can reach more audience, so more girls and boys, whoever wants to join science, or also like people that are interested in this topic. And basically, yeah, the thing is that because it's almost August, right? It's summer, so usually a lot of people are on vacation. I think that there is even more higher demand to then put it on the YouTube. So yeah, how are you guys doing?
Doing fine today. How about you?
Oh, I'm great. Did you see we have this addition down here where it has a live caption, a capture of the words. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, the transcript. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
That's great.
Yeah. So I'll just start a little bit with introducing you guys, and I think I'm going to then just start the recording in about 5 to 10 minutes when we're going to start. So, but yeah, so Nick and Danny, they're both plant genetics, right? The researcher in plant genetics here in Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory in New York. And I believe Danny is from Brazil and Nick is from USA. So we have, and I'm from Slovenia, and we have like all over the world like scientists joining here doing the research. So the beauty of I would say of being a scientist is that you can really go pretty much at everywhere or anywhere in this world and do the exact same research, pretty much similar research. So that's really great, I think. So yeah, I would encourage like whoever joins in to just ask questions in between, like later, whenever. I really would like to have a nice a dialogue. Like it's very relaxed. It's very like literally we are here to answer any kind of questions or hopefully to maybe open eyes to some certain topic, right? So Nick, what are you doing exactly? Actually, I never asked you this. What is your topic?
So yeah, just like for today or just what I do in general every day?
Yeah. Oh, really?
So yeah, what we're talking about today we're going to talk about just, why we're trying to study plants, some of the specific stuff that I've been able to do here, some examples of that. What are some of the questions going forward with climate change, and some of the motivations behind that. I think that's the summary.
Oh, that's great. And you, Danny?
I try to understand.
Yeah.
So I try to understand how plants respond to light environment. So one of the ways that we have to increase production is simply to put more plants per area, right? And then plants end up shading each other. And it has some consequences in their growth. For instance, it has a negative impact in the roots. So what we are trying to do in the lab is to find a way to not let it happen so that the plants, even when they are shaded, have normal roots. And this is great because when you have good roots, you can have a proper growth, right? And then you don't have problems with food production, for instance. So that's what we are doing in the lab right now.
That is interesting. I even saw some article that you have some connection with what was it, with a COVID production in plants or something it was. What was it already?
Oh yeah, to produce proteins of the virus in plants. So the idea is to do that. So we have materials to do research, right, to develop vaccines or some kind of drug to try to fight the virus.
Interesting. Are plants a good like a source of protein production? Is it like
yeah, actually, yes. You can
interesting.
get a good yield in tobacco plants that we use, and there are some groups that are trying to do and tiny plants called duckweed that you can grow basically anywhere in like large quantities. So if you can, for instance, produce vaccines in there, it's a better alternative than the methods that we have today.
Oh, this is very interesting.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say it's really cool about doing it in plants, because a lot of the times when you're trying to produce these types of proteins, they'll do it in bacteria, but bacteria lack some of the cellular structures that you need to do these sort of modification on proteins, but plants have those. And so sometimes it's actually better to do these productions in plant systems because they more closely mimic what actually is produced in the real world.
Oh, wow, this is actually very interesting. So would you say that basically, like, if the yield is it the yield similar in plants versus in bacteria, like in the terms of protein production, or better, you would say, or worse?
That's tough. I don't know if in the end, if you, let's say you could produce in both, probably it would be better to do it in bacteria directly, because you can do this in bioreactors, right? And you need less area. So probably would be better still to produce in bacteria. But as Nick said, plants have some advantages.
I see. Interesting. Now, that's great. Thank you so much for the introductory part. I think we can basically start with our talk, and people will join in later. And yeah, I think we are recording already, so it's perfect. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this Saturday workshop. It's called Inspire Shop. Hopefully we will inspire you to join or to become a plant biologist, a plant scientist, or maybe even like to just learn more about the topic. But what I really liked about this topic is how much you can really contribute to basically to all the problems that our planet is facing right now, right? So I see a lot of times there are some controversial topics about GMO and so on. And I think that we have to be very clear on that, us scientists, how plant genetics and whatever we are doing with, let's say, GMO, right? It's actually helping the planet. It's not what a lot of time you get misinformation about this. It's actually really important. And I'll be very happy to actually touch a little bit on that also today. But here we have Nick and Danny. They're both postdocs in Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. Nick prepared some slides where he's going to talk a little bit about plant genetics. And Danny will also join the conversation. And please, I really encourage everyone to just jump in and ask any question. As I said, no question is a silly question. I will ask silly questions. So please just join me asking any kind of questions. And we will be very happy, and they will be happy to discuss about it. So please, yeah, Nick, go ahead. The floor is yours.
All right. So hi, everyone. My name's Nick Gladman. I'm a PhD scientist here at Cold Spring Harbor Labs. I'm going to be talking today about plant science and plant genetics and how that can play into trying to resolve some larger issues that the world is facing right now. But to give you a little background, so we're here located at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. That's in Long Island. It's actually located right around here. We're in this little circle. So we're not too far away from New York City. And when you think of New York City, indeed, when you think of basically this whole area of Long Island where we're on, you think of very dense, urbanized localities, not a lot of green space necessarily to grow things. And so the concept is, why are we studying plants? Or maybe the bigger question is, why should we study plants or crops in the first place? And there's lots of reasons for that. But one of the big reasons that I can say for myself and for a lot of people that are doing this right now is that we want to try to generate a lot of sustainable agriculture in the changing world that's coming up ahead of us. And as we all know, global population has just skyrocketed over the last couple hundred years. And we know that's just going to continue to keep getting even bigger and bigger as we go forward, surpassing 9 billion people, not into the too distant future. And so the challenge for us as plant scientists and for actual farmers who do a lot of the actual groundwork is trying to feed so many people when the amount of arable land or the land that you can productively farm upon is essentially going to be stagnated, or in some cases actually going to decrease around the world. And one of the reasons that it's going to decrease around the world is certain farming practices may not be the best for it, but we're also facing things like climate change. And if there's lots of different kinds of modelings that have been done on this, but the thought is even kind of in the best case scenario, you're going to see a lot of yield loss going forward due to changes in the climate, due to increased heat, due to different types of weather patterns, due to increased amount of pests that you're seeing because you have longer, hotter summers and things like that. And so at the end of the day, this is really something that's influencing the economy, the health of people, and overall kind of global equality. And that's something that we need to think about and move forward with and have it constantly in our mind when we're dealing with what we're doing in the lab every day. The other reason is why we study plants is that they're really, really cool. Plants have been around for so many years, been around way longer than humans. And it's because of that that they can answer lots of different kinds of questions. And that's actually one reason that humans have been able to grow to the society we have now, is because plants have already done a lot of the work. So when you think about it, we have a lot of grains and grasses and things like that that basically make up the largest production food in the world, whether it's for direct human consumption or we're feeding it to livestock. This has allowed our society to grow to what it is. It's essentially, it's cultivated agriculture. So it's plants like that we've domesticated, but then there's lots of different kinds of things that we can look to in the natural environment that can raise all sorts of really fun and interesting questions, like how can you have these massive saguaro cacti growing in a very arid desert-like condition where they can help to really sustain a lot of diverse ecosystems as well. You can have citrus fruits that are growing in various types of the world that produce just absolutely some of the most delicious things I've ever eaten in my life. And then you have these really interesting, like just what I would call weird plants. These are the bristlecone pines as an example of this. Some of these are older than the pyramids. They've been around for over 4,000 years. They've just existed like this in this very gnarly kind of structure for a very long time. And so we have these diverse plants, some growing big, some growing small, some around for centuries, some around for millennia. And all of them have done this in a way that allows us to ask a lot of really cool questions that can not just give us an idea into basic biology, but can also allow us to see how can we improve society for ourselves and for our fellow person. Excuse me. So some of the questions you might come across, and this is something I also like about plants, is you see them every day. You don't think about it. Sometimes you think they're boring, and sometimes they might be. But they can just generate a lot of instant questions because they're in front of you all the time. So one of the ones you might think about is, how can plants survive in the cold? I mean, so this is an example, same picture, same place I took this picture. One was this winter and one was just a few days ago. So how can so many plants survive these deep freezes that we have at our parallel here on the globe and in various even more northern latitudes or southern latitudes? And well, we know that there's lots of different kinds of mechanisms for this. Sometimes plants don't survive. Sometimes they just produce seeds and those seeds can withstand the cold and that's how they reproduce. Then you have these perennial plants or things like trees or other things that have diverse mechanisms for how they can survive. So they just have certain insulated structures within their entire plant system that allows them to just survive these kind of stem cell niches, and then they can flower again the next summer or something like that. And then on the other hand, you have the exact opposite question, is how can plants survive extreme heat, just like the saguaro cacti? And there's lots of different reasons for that as well. There's photosynthetic reasons, there's how they construct their cell walls and other kinds of tissues and how it's layered. And it's very, very fascinating. And these things have also been used to apply for certain other types of research, whether it's engineering or even biomedical components. And then there's also the question of, why do some plants act differently than others? This is kind of getting on to that last question, but I'm showing you here, these are seedlings that we use in our research. It's a plant called sorghum. It's a grain, it's like wheat. But all these seedlings you see here, they come from the exact same plant. They come from the exact same parent. So it's all these little grains coming from the same seed head. So they should be very similar genetically. So their DNA should be highly, highly similar. But what we see here is that something happened where this one little plant here is completely lacking all of its chloroplasts. So, or chlorophyll rather. So it's completely white, it's albino. It can't photosynthesize, yet it's managing to survive and grow at almost comparable level to some of its siblings. And we want to think like, how is that even possible to begin with? But then what does that mean going forward if it can sustain itself this long without its primary mechanism of generating energy and nutrients for itself? And so if we think about that, we can understand like, okay, maybe we treat it differently. Maybe we grow it in a different condition. If we can do this for this type of plant in this stress environment, what does that mean for other plants and other types of crops that we've always kind of put to the side? And maybe we can bring those into the forefront and maybe grow them in certain places that we didn't think we could grow them anymore, feed more people. So I really like this. I think this is a pretty bizarre thing. And this actually happens kind of on the regular too. You just see these little quirky physical traits, and it just generates a whole lot of interesting, fun questions that you can have. And all these questions really go back to the types of research that I do, that Danny does, that we all do. It's just the kind of have a natural curious person or a natural curious thought. Maybe we're on our own, or maybe we're talking to each other over lunch, something like that. And you come up with an idea, like maybe, and the idea that I've had for a lot of my research is, how can we modify the actual seed structure and the flower structures in order to produce more grain? So you get essentially higher yield off one plant in a way that's more efficient for the land acres that you're using. Danny was talking about how you don't have to plant so densely maybe to generate the same amount of yield per acre. And it's a similar, there's lots of different ways you can tackle this. And this is the one way that I've done it. So you have an idea and you think like, okay, I know that there are certain genes that influence how these seeds and flowers develop over time. And we can look at research that's been done in other similarly or even distantly related crops on the evolutionary tree, or plants, I should say. And this is one example. So this is Arabidopsis. This is something that Danny works with all the time, and I occasionally work with as well. And it's just a very well-known, well-studied plant system. And from that work that a lot of other people have done, we were to understand, okay, we know certain genes in this. So let's see if we can't translate that to a crop, to an actual crop that people eat. In this case, this is sorghum. This is actually a very small little sorghum seed head here. This is at a very early stage of development, and over time has a bunch of little stem cells all around it. It'll actually grow and develop into something that's, you know, maybe a third of a meter in height and very dense and producing thousands and thousands of seeds. So from this little small thing, something very big will grow. And we know that if we modify certain genes that are expressed in this growing little seed head at very specific times, we can modify it so that we can actually get increased yield of grain. And so this is showing you a little example of something that I've done where we have, we've modified several different kinds of genes, and we can say that this is how fertility normally works in a regular sorghum plant, where you have seed grains that fill on some flowers, but not in others. So essentially you have about 50% fertility on these flowers. So you're not making about 50% of the grain you would based on the number of flowers you have. But based on these adjustments that we've made in our plant systems, we can actually have complete flower fertility. And so we can almost, you know, double to 50% increase of all the grain you can have for one single plant, which is a very sizable increase for, you know, one or two mutations that you might generate in a plant. And that obviously has repercussions for feeding a lot more people or being a lot more efficient in certain situations. And the nice thing about that is, all these kinds of new research results we have and positive results feedback into even more questions and even more possible pathways we can to improving plants, improving agricultural systems, and feeding a lot more people. I think it's very cool. So this is a pretty particularly interesting result. We actually, just to say, it's actually modifying certain hormone signaling in plants. So plants have hormones just like animals do, and they're very important for development. And if you modulate how that hormone system works in plants, just like you can in lots of other living things, you're going to modify how things grow and develop over time. And so it's just a really wonderful aspect of evolution that one thing informs the other. Another thing that we've
Can
been
I
working-
ask you here a question?
Yeah.
Since we can hear, so is it then the same as we see in the evolutionary process, which you can see this, the genes are kind of changing over the evolution. Also depends on where the plant is. So if you put the same plant into a different environment, it will have a lower yield or it will have a bigger yield, right? So actually, we're talking also here on how you don't need to make how these changes could also happen spontaneously by just epigenetic or environmental changes. Is this true? Is this correct?
That is absolutely true. And people talk about genetic engineering or genetically modifying plants, but plants have been genetically modifying themselves for millions of years. And through the domestication process, just by growing plants in a certain area, not even doing any sort of modern molecular techniques, the plants change over time, and they adapt to their local environment. And we select them naturally as humans as like, we want things that grow better or more resistant to heat. And so a lot of plants that are grown, let's just take this sorghum plant here, that I'm talking about. It was originally cultivated and domesticated in in hotter, drier parts of Africa. But then it's been transported and domesticated in other parts of the world, in China, in the colder, wetter climates as well. And so initially, that kind of sorghum plant didn't do very well. But over the course of subsequent generations and breeding, what we found is that they actually just generated a different kind of plant that looks quite a bit different, but grows there, thrives there, and can do different things. But you can't just take these plants as they exist right now and switch them around in their various geographical locations, because it's not going to work out well. And that's going to be that's one of the big challenges of agriculture is you can't just take one system and plop it somewhere else, because it's not going to work. It's not going to work the way you want it to. So it takes a lot of knowledge of the local area, of the farming practices of that area, talking to people and trying to really optimize this particular setup. You can't grow corn everywhere. You can't grow tomatoes everywhere, but you can grow some things, and some things you should grow in those areas for lots of other really good reasons. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
I guess this is why my lychee plant never really grew in Slovenia, because we had the right. I guess I understand why now. When I was a little girl, I wanted to plant lychee because I love it, and it didn't grow.
But that's the point. It's like maybe it wasn't getting enough sunlight. Maybe the day length, the amount of sun it was getting a day, wasn't sufficient. It's all these things you have to think about. Farming's not easy. It's very hard work. It's complicated work. Yeah.
I think we have a raised hand.
Oh,
okay.
I've got a question. Yeah. So this conversation sparked a question in me, is that like, do plants lose this like domestication plasticity after they've been moved? Like, are there like crops, for example, like is like teosinte like better for some reason towards like to adapt like in multiple environments, or like is there like a point of no return once one plant has gone very adapted to a certain environment to like move it back? Or is it just a matter of?
It's an interesting question. It gets to the notion of speciation, essentially. It's like, how far can you essentially breed a plant in a certain area where if you immediately move it back, is it even going to survive because it's so different? And so that's a good question. The thought is like, it shouldn't technically lose its plasticity, because if you bring it there and then you still make gradual changes for it, it should still be able to adapt to certain areas within reason, within certain levels of expectation. But I can't grow almond trees in a desert because I need a lot of water. So there's things like that. But I could probably grow plants that require not a lot of water. I can grow those in places where it's very wet or very damp. There's still going to be challenges. But yeah, you make a good point. But the sort of evolutionary plasticity of something, it still exists there, but it's to what extent does that environment change so much or so rapidly that it doesn't even have time to flex those kinds of muscles.
Can I add something to this? In the matter of domestication, for instance, when you think of tomatoes that we grow in the field here, they are adapted to conditions that are very different from the original tomatoes from the Andes.
Yeah.
And if you move these tomatoes that grow here to another location that looks like the Andes, for instance, they won't grow well, right? But one thing that people do, for instance, with tomato, is to go back to the wild species relatives that are closest, and try to find in those species genes that could help the tomatoes that we domesticate to grow better under certain conditions that are more resistant to drought, high altitude, or salinity, or even herbivores, right? So that's where plant biologists can help. We can try to make things move faster one way or the other, right? As Nick was saying, it's really hard to get new varieties to grow in a new area, right? But we can try to speed things up with the knowledge that we accumulate through studying the plants very thoroughly.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
So is it important then to like steward and to maintain like ancestral lines of these things? Like for us, like I know there's the idea of seed banks, but to have like these wild varieties, because they have this, I guess, innate diversity from whatever before they got highly speciated. Like
for
sure.
that exact reason, yeah, absolutely. Because you mentioned teosinte, which, if people don't know, that's just the sort of ancestor of modern corn plants. And people actually have crossed, corn with teosinte and seen like what happens, and they've evaluated at a genetic level to see, what is going on here and how can these things adapt. But if we don't maintain that genetic diversity, it's gone forever, and that door is closed. Because evolution has already done that experiment. It's already generated this potentially wonderful resource. And then if it's gone, it's gone. And that's bad for us too, not just for that plant. So yeah, those are good points. I completely forgot about the interbreeding of old ancestral lines, Danny. That was a great catch. So yeah, so going on to like a different thing that's also a component of the research that we do, it's not just the grains you make, but it's also the root structures that you want to look at. So you have the shoots and you have the roots. So you have the top part, the green part, and you have the part that's underground. And that's harder to study because it's harder to study things that you can't see that are covered in dirt. But one of the things that allows us to do this is we can grow things essentially in liquid. You can grow it in hydroponics. And we can start to understand what changes are occurring in the root structures at a genetic level under certain conditions. Let's say it's low nutrient conditions. And we can see how can we make a better plant. So the example that we're seeing here is we're just seeing a plant that's another sorghum plant. We're looking at its root structure here that's being grown over the course of about 2 weeks. And we have it in just, I would call it, sufficient phosphorus conditions. That's what the P stands for. And you have it in sort of low or limiting phosphorus conditions. And you can see that under sufficient conditions, the roots seem to stay about the same. But then when we grow it in this limiting phosphorus conditions, the root system really expands outward and also down. And it's very interesting about why it does that. And the reason that we think it grows outwards, especially, or lateralizes, is because in the case of phosphorus, it's usually located at the top of the soil, or the topsoil, just based on how the soil systems work in a lot of parts of the world. And so this sort of generalized response of roots growing out, but not necessarily as much down, is because it evolved in that kind of situation. And so since we know that this is caused by certain genetic factors and pathways, we can go in and we've identified a lot of potential candidates within the sorghum genome that we can modify and tweak to say, how can we make a bigger root structure to begin with so that it can get sufficient nutrients, and that way we can get better grain, maybe even on lower quality soil. And so that's something that we've done as well. But that's also this sort of thinking about, okay, we're making root structures, we're trying to maintain soil quality and quantity. But the thing that we need to think about going forward is, and this is kind of moving to a bit of a forward-looking component of this talk, is traditional agriculture has done a lot for humanity, but it also has a lot of significant limitations. And it's something that as plant researchers, we need to think about going forward, is that it's probably not going to necessarily stay the same. And so one of the things that has been growing in the United States, as well as all over the world, is this component of indoor farming and also vertical farming. So you have here on the left, this massive acre and acre, sized indoor greenhouse facility that's growing thousands and thousands of tomato plants. And this is kind of a wonderful system when you think about it, because it actually irrigates everything through collected rainwater in its system. So it uses about 99% less, I would say maybe 90% less input water than like a normal system that's grown on land. It also has essentially zero pesticides because it's a closed system. And as long as you make sure you're not walking in with any bugs on you, you can essentially cut back the amount of pesticides you're putting out into the environment. So there's always some trade-offs though. I mean, you still have to build this large structure. And so there's a carbon footprint there. But maybe, you know, going long-term into the future, you're going to have a lot more benefits than that because you can maintain a lot more green spaces and build up soil health going forward. The exact same thing here is on the right. It's another type of greenhouse facility, but this is what we call vertical farming, where it's another clean, sterile environment. You don't have a lot of pesticides. Irrigations are much more efficient, but you just grow it up instead of out. And you can't grow all types of plants like this, but you can grow, you know, stuff that can generally be very healthy, very nutritional, can be used on lots of different kinds of foods. And so this is another aspect. So you have things that can grow out wide and big, like this greenhouse on the left, or you can grow these kinds of vertical farmings in cities. And that way you have fresh produce that you can get to more densely populated areas like New York City in this case. And this actually vertical farm here on the right, I believe is located in New Jersey. And that's actually this company's particular business model. So and that's something as plant scientists we need to think about. It's like, okay, do we need to make a root system that's good for growing in soil, or should we try to think about how we can make plants that would be better grown in these kinds of conditions as well? And that's something that we're doing. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Oh, I froze. Okay. A question that might arise is, okay, so plants produce stuff for us using natural light that is available, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you produce indoor, you have to contribute with the light. You need to have a light source, right? And then you have the electricity bill and all the expenses of growing stuff indoors, right?
Absolutely.
Can this affect the price of the food? Can the food get more expensive for people to buy?
The answer is it kind of depends, but in a lot of these setups, it's actually it can be comparable in my experience, because while you do have like that increased electricity cost, you're actually saving money in lots of other ways, because you're saving it by, okay, I don't have to treat with pesticides. I don't have to distribute so much phosphorus and nitrogen onto the ground. I don't, I have my setup here where I have these, let's say like these big, rows within the greenhouse, and I can have just a robot go through and check things and harvest things, but I don't have to buy really massive, hundreds of thousands of dollars equipment in order to process, a 100-acre field instead. And so the initial costs might be high for the building, but the long-term costs actually make a lot of these essentially as affordable right now as standard farming systems going forward. And things are still getting improved and still being better, and there's obviously trade-offs. But from what I am aware of, a lot of these things are, it's basically the same. I mean, that's what I've experienced. I don't know if you've experienced something different.
No, I totally agree. And I think another thing is you can produce throughout the whole year. Yep. And that's different from a field. Here, you cannot produce anything when it's winter, and certain crops will grow when it is too hot in the summer. But if you are inside a controlled environment, and you don't have problems with drought or temperature or high winds, this also helps a lot. So for sure, I also think that it shouldn't affect much of the price, and maybe even might help make everything cheaper.
Those are great points also. Another thing I'll say is so these are obviously very large buildings and structures, but they're still compartmentalized to an extent. There's multiple buildings or multiple sealed rooms. And so, heaven forbid that you have an insect population that comes in and starts to prey on everything, that might be harder to deal with out in the field. But in these cases, you can shut off an entire wing, clear it out, make sure everything's sterile. And that way you don't lose your whole harvest, you just lose part of it in, worst case kind of scenario. So that's another.
Disagree.
Yeah, those are all.
Hear me, Nick?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, now my microphone started to work again. Sorry. There is a question from the audience, and it's actually about what can you explain about plant genetics modification for a certain amount of seeds? regarding the quality of the offsprings.
Okay, that's a good point. Because how we're doing it in terms of this particular example for us, for my research, is we're modifying it so that we're essentially taking flowers that would not normally be fertile and making them fertile. So they're essentially acting like the other normally fertile flowers on that plant, how it begins with. So the only thing that changes about that is maybe the seed size is a little different. We don't think that anything that how the seed is filled with nutrients, so the actual components that actually is meant to feed the embryo within the seed, we don't think anything is changing with that because we haven't modified anything else. We still have yet to evaluate that, but that's also something that you need to be aware of because you're making more seed. Maybe all the seed is not getting as much nutrients as the fewer number of seeds on the other plant, and maybe that's actually going to have a detrimental effect in terms of how healthy those seeds are if you want to grow them up as the next generation. But in terms of genetically modifying those plants, you always try to modify like as few things as possible in the most controlled way that's not going to affect things like, so make sure that's not going to hurt nutrients, accumulation of things like that. But it's not something that we have evaluated yet, but that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
And how do you evaluate the nutrients value? Do you use any special approaches?
There's lots of different ways you can evaluate like the nutrient composition. Something is called, I've forgotten it. It's a very large acronym. It's essentially mass spectrometry, but you can take seeds, or you can actually do this with leaves too if you want to see what the composition of leaves are. We do that for other studies, but you can take the seeds and you put them in a situation where it essentially vaporizes the seeds, and you evaluate the micronutrient composition of those seeds based on just a chemical analysis. And that way you can evaluate things like metal contents, so like zinc or iron. And you can look at other components, sulfur, phosphorus, things like that. There's other very chemical analyses that you can do that are fairly well established for just isolating and quantifying those for various parts of the plant. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, and going into, again, these considerations of changing how we're thinking about plants going forward is one of the, I would say, larger problems of modern agriculture. It has been planting, thousands of acres of just corn in one spot. So it's monoculture, and that's not the best way to do it in lots of situations, but that's how the system is set up, and that's how it's sort of been ingrained in our minds to think about it. In terms of our research, Jenny talked about planting density. And this is one thing that we need to think about, is changing this up to actually very old methods of agriculture. In this case, on the left, we have something called intercropping, where you're just putting one plant, one crop in between the others. So you're spacing things out. And this helps for a lot of things. It helps for minimizing pests. It also helps that you're changing up the planting density. And this is also potentially beneficial for soil health as well. So you're not just completely doing the exact same crop in the same manner, depleting the soil in the same kinds of way. So that's another thing that on an agricultural system at a higher level is being adopted a bit more regularly. And it's something as plant scientists, in terms of our research, we need to be aware of in terms of, okay, what strategies do we want to have in terms of modifying plants going forward to optimize it? The other thing is we also need to think about, maybe we should be looking at completely different plant systems. We've been talking about maize, we've been talking about corn, we've been talking about sorghum, rice, all these very standard types of large scale farming. But we call certain things weeds, but that's just because we don't want to eat them sometimes. And sometimes weeds can be very delicious, actually. There's something called kudzu that's considered a weed down in the southern United States that's incredibly damaging to lots of crops, but it's actually very delicious if you want to cook it up, and it grows very well. But people don't want that because they want to grow something else. And oftentimes what they want to grow is something that's profitable for them. And you can't necessarily fault farmers for doing that. But a lot of the time people grow things, especially in this country, is for the components of livestock feed. And so there's obviously issues with growing livestock and thinking about carbon footprints. And, there's absolutely a place for livestock growth and consuming of animal proteins in various parts of the world for getting nutrients. But I have to say, definitely in this country, we need to reconsider how we're setting up our agricultural systems. Do we want to shift it more towards, vegetarian-based things, direct feeding to humans based on the grains that we have, rather than cycling it through livestock in terms of trying to get those nutrient resources for eventual animal meat? Besides, this is a very cute little calf. But that's just, again, something that we need to consider. But that's also a larger societal trend that we as plant scientists can be involved in that conversation, but we might not be able to, change everyone's mind, because that's really something that we need to think about on a larger scale. And as generations change, as us as humans, that might change as well. So that's kind of it for the main talk, but I want to talk a bit about why I do this, just as a kind of a general motivation. You might have gotten it, but this makes me happy. This is me riding the subway in New York City. I think I was thinking about a particularly interesting tomato plant, and that's why I smiled. But it really does, and that's a selfish reason. I like asking these questions. I like having conversations with Paloma and Danny and talking about this new potentially undiscovered, fact that I'm the first one to see, and it's very exciting in terms of a general scientific pursuit. But one of the other reasons I do this is because as I said, I want to work towards feeding people, and I might be a small part of that. My work might not be out actually doing its job for 20 years because it needs to go through scientific rigor and pass and fail and all these kinds of things. But I take satisfaction in that, and that's something that I want to be a part of. And because at the end of the day, I really do think that food helps to connect people, whether it's the agriculture that we have around us, whether it's the fruits we eat, whether it's the meals that we make and that we share with the people that we know, or even complete strangers. It can really help to, I think, bridge a lot of gaps and open up that initial door for conversation and cultural exchange. And based on that, I'll list up, a couple of these quotes that I kind of agree with. One quote is, it's been attributed to a lot of different people, but essentially you can't build peace on empty stomachs. This quote is by sort of a famous chef and documentarian, Anthony Bourdain, talking about cultural exchanges. But yeah, the one thing I will say is, Nobel Prize has some issues with it, but plant scientists usually don't get the Nobel Prize in physiology or medicine or chemistry or things like that. Plant scientists, if they get any of those kinds of Nobel Awards, it's for peace. And it's for the reasons that they've tried to feed people, and that's what they do. And that's the recognition that they generally get at that kind of stage. And that's just a little food for thought. Yeah, so but with that's the end of the formal slides, and we can have more discussion now as well.
That is great. Thank you so much, both. I believe that actually I didn't know about the Nobel Prize, that this is for the peace, and actually that is very noble of them to do that. That's great. But yeah, I will give the floor also to Danny, because there were actually some questions also from the audience. Some people couldn't join, also because, as I said, it's a time of holidays, but they sent in questions in advance. And I would like to engage all the scientists to help to answer those questions. So one of the questions would be, and actually it's a very great one, and I also was thinking about it the same way, and it says how to approach the benefits of plant genetics in societies when transgenic plants are misjudged. Which is what also I started maybe a little bit of this conversation in the beginning, that there is a big movement against, genetic modified plants and so on. And I think it's one of the typical, another thing of misinformation, as we are in post-pandemic era, and we know a lot about those things. How, what do you think, how this could be tackled, or also like maybe how to approach that thing?
This is really tough, and I don't think there's an easy answer for this, or not a single solution for this. As you said, in this pandemic era, we had like some good examples of how misinformation is widespread, and how people don't have like basic knowledge of how science works. And this is our fault as scientists. This is our fault as well, to not being able to convey the message properly, or to explain to people how scientific method works, right? And then maybe we are not good enough in delivering information in a manner that the public can understand. And that's on our back. But also there is a more fundamental problem that should be addressed at school. So maybe we have to try to change the way how we teach kids on how to think of science, and have, like, since an early age, those classes trying to, teach scientific method and inspire critical thinking since an early age. But what we can do as plant scientists is to have a honest conversation about transgenics, because usually we see a side that is completely in favor of transgenics and doesn't have the ability to acknowledge that there is misuse of this as well, because in the end, the companies who are producing this, they're interested in profit, right? And sometimes there is misuse, and people don't care about socio-economic problems of, that are derived of the use of those transgenics. And this is bad, and we have to be honest about it and acknowledge that it happens. But on the other hand, we cannot just let people say, oh, I'm completely against transgenics, because you cannot be against a technique or a field of work. It's like saying, this is something my PhD advisor told me once. She said, it's the same thing as saying, I'm against radioactivity, because you can use it to, kill people, make bombs or whatever. Yes, but you can use it as well to treat cancer patients. So how can you be against a whole field of study, right? Or against a technique? You can be against the use that people make of it, but not against it. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
we need to have
definitely.
a more honest conversation about things, and this can make the public comes, closer to us. Because while we keep saying, oh, this is good, you have to trust me that this is good, and people can see that there are problems derived of the use of transgenics, we won't be able to convince anyone. So first we need to take a step back and then have an honest conversation with people.
On this note, I would ask you, what do you think about the seeds that are only used for one single season, that are terminated? This is a little bit tricky. Also, as much as I promote this field, it is a little bit conflicting, no?
Do you want to help with this one, Nick?
So, and I haven't checked on this in a while. My understanding is that they originally designed these terminator seeds kind of early on when they were trying to generate transgenic plants, because it was actually it was because so you'd have to buy more seed, but another mechanism was they knew that through this particular technology, you wouldn't necessarily get drift. You wouldn't get these kinds of genetic treatments that would drift over to other plants or other crops, and it wouldn't grow then. So you're not propagating these transgenic plants to people who don't want them or to another person's field. So it was meant to set also as a stop for that. There was a lot of pushback for the reasons that you said, in terms of you can't grow up your own seed. What are you talking about? And that was initially shot down by a lot of the companies back in the early days. So Monsanto, some of the other ones. And I didn't think that, I could be wrong, but my understanding is they haven't sold those for a very long time. And I still don't think they actually do. But a lot of the reason, there's also some and maybe they do, but there's also a misconception, I think, a lot of the times, in that people only grow up seeds once and they don't grow them up the second season, they don't keep it. And that's actually due usually to a very old practice called hybrid seeds. And that's just because you sell seeds to the farmers that are crossed by parents in a very particular way. And their genetic makeup is such that that generation that grows up, they're very healthy, they produce a lot of seed, but the seed that you could collect from that generation, its genetic material is going to be very different. And it's not going to grow as consistently. It's not going to have the same traits that you want, because of just how it works in terms of segregation. And so because of that, farmers don't want to reuse that seed because they can't trust it. They could go back and buy heirloom seed that they know grows consistently over time and that genetics are stable. And people do that. And again, that's value in terms of retaining those types of older heirloom varieties that we talked about earlier, and they should absolutely do that. But a lot of the times in modern agriculture, a lot of farmers, they spend the money to just get a reliable thing they have every single season, and they pay for it. But yeah, so Danny, I don't know about the Terminator seeds. Maybe you know a bit more, something different than me about that.
No, it's exactly the same thing that I know.
It is, I think it's like a very thin line between, where to, I guess there should be like some kind of, I don't know, laws put in place, right, for the future of those types of seeds, or also like you said, it is important because you want to prevent from spreading, but at the same time, you don't want to stop it. So definitely it should be it's something for, I don't know if they have discussions on this or not, but I'm pretty sure they are, because it's something very important for the future.
You're 100% correct. I've talked with people who it's anecdotal, but they know farmers back in in their home countries that they come from, and they've had concerns about they bought all these new seeds from these seed companies and having good results, but it didn't work out, or one season they didn't have any, they didn't have a good yield, and they wanted to go back to their old seeds, but they didn't have enough because they just weren't maintaining them anymore. The seeds are very old, and if you don't properly store your seeds, they're not good. And so again, then you have the situation where that resource is gone forever, potentially. And it's devastating. It absolutely is. And this is kind of going back to something you mentioned earlier, is you can't just transplant one system of agriculture all over the world, because it's not going to work for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's the nature of the area you're growing in, and sometimes it's the economy of that area. Sometimes it's just the infrastructure of that area, and it's something that, again, we have to be very, very cognizant of when trying to say, like, this is the silver bullet, this is going to solve everything. Transgenics can't solve everything. It's a tool, just like Danny said, and we need to be, again, just very aware of that.
That's a great idea, I think, for one of the missions for the Girls in Science to to try to tackle or to be focused on, and definitely is to put the right laws in place that will benefit the society rather than anything else, right? After all, we all want to save the planet, right?
It needs to absolutely be considered. And again, it's hard we have these seed banks all over the world, and they're a wonderful resource, but they're meant for the worst, like the end of days kind of worst case scenario. That's what they're there for. They're not for, unfortunately, this, small farmers in, certain parts of Asia or even the United States. And it's like, I need some seeds. Can you help me? It's like, that's not what it's for. It's for a cataclysm, and we need to rebuild things. And that's a problem. And so, yeah, we need to consider how we as a society, through government or through whatever, can help this. You're right.
I'm going to give the floor to anyone else if they want to ask questions, because I have two more, but just if anyone else wants to ask, please go ahead.
I guess I kind of wanted to ask a little bit, or kind of push the conversation into where we were a bit before, about alternative plants, because in our mind, you mentioned kudzu earlier, as there's all these other plants that we can eat that maybe are better adapted to the changing world that we're facing, and how can we restructure how we're thinking about what we are subsisting off of, because maybe we shouldn't put all of our stock into transgenics as being the future. Maybe it's also about kind of stewarding these other plants that are doing really well in these environments, that maybe wouldn't require as much effort on the side of engineering. I'm just kind of wanting to pick your brains about this. That's kind of yeah.
Danny, do you want to take that one first, or?
I just agreed with everything that you said, that we need alternative crops, basically. And I don't know how to solve this as a plant biologist, because in the end, we are not the ones that are, driving the decision of which plants are going to the field or not, right? There is an economic thing involved. and it has to be, it has to generate profit for the farmers. Otherwise, they're not going to be, planted in large scale. So honestly, I don't know how us as plant scientists can help to drive this. Nick, maybe you have some idea.
Maybe we could take over the world and just make all the right? No, I mean, I agree with what you said, Kat, agree with what you said, Danny. Yeah, I mean, this is something that needs to be from the ground up. I mean, like, people in this country, they like to eat meat. So we're going to grow corn to feed them. We're going to grow, and then we're going to grow all the related crops. But if people said, like, maybe I want to eat kudzu, maybe I want to eat all these things, they could do that. So we need to get a better marketing team in terms of science communication, maybe, but it's not easy. It's something that's going to be done through people that have more influence than we do at the moment, I think.
We would be happy to come up at any moment to help make those plants better.
Yeah.
But we won't be the ones making the change of what is going to a field or not.
Absolutely.
But it's an excellent question.
We have Christian hand, so joining the conversation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So what I want to simply share with you guys today is, according to the experience that we've had with this COVID-19 pandemic all over the world, specifically in Africa, I'm located, my location is Africa right now. But we've just tried to see like a huge amount of people who are dealing with shortage of food, and food contrarily means the amount of plants that we have, or the variation of plants that we have on Earth, or in a given or a certain location. So as we said, or we've learned today with the genetic modification of plants according to the location or the type of plants that we're modifying. So I was just asking myself, how do we do, or what can we do to take the different types of plants on Earth in different locations? Because some different countries are faced droughts, and we planting of some, for example, rice or Irish potatoes in droughty areas, it's really, really harsh. So as scientists, that's what we're here for. What can we do, like, to take these different types of plants according to the environment that we're located in, to bring up one real answer for these people who really don't even understand what science is, but they need to feed, they need to get a good health, and the good health comes from food. I don't know if you can try to relate such things and come up with an answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Yeah, the floor is yours.
I mean, I'm very sorry to hear all that. Of course, I mean, it's something that happens every day all around the world. People don't have enough food for the reasons and partly for the reasons that you say. And I don't have a good answer. And that really, I don't like saying that, but I don't. Because part of it is, it's a complicated situation, and I hate saying that too. But you're trying to reach out and empathize with people and try to explain things to them about why it might be better to do this or to strategize. But at the end of the day, like, people, they're going to try to do either what, to make money to get by, or something like this, or maybe they were told falsehoods about certain processes, and I don't know. I can't come up with a coherent answer at this moment, because it's something that you have to prevent before it happens. And it kind of goes to what Jenny was saying earlier, is we as scientists and people who want to try to be in science communication, this has to start earlier, because it's almost too late. when this kind of situation happens. We can come in and we can try to fix it, you know, right now as a larger community, but it'll be better if we can try to prevent it. But I can't, I'm sorry, I can't think of something really to say. I mean, Danny, do you?
Yeah, also this is hard because it's not just a matter of being able to produce food locally. Of course, this is something that we might somehow be able to help, but in my opinion, it's more a matter of food distribution, right? Because in parts of Europe, for instance, people are not producing anything in there and they're getting it from other places, right? Producing a ton of stuff in US and China and Brazil, and this food goes to other places. Like in Brazil now, I don't know if you know, but because of the pandemic as well, we are one of the biggest food producers in the world, right? To buy rice and beans, there's like the basis of the nutrition for people in Brazil. To buy this, it's almost impossible because it's so expensive, because it's much better to send it to other countries that pay in dollar than to keep it inside Brazil. So people are having trouble in feeding their families. But it's not a matter of we are not producing enough food. It's an economical problem. It's a social problem. It's not a problem with food production. It's a problem of food distribution. And I feel like this is probably, I don't know specifically what's happening in Africa, but from my experience of what's happening in my home country, I would say it's not that plant biologists will be able to solve that. It's a bigger issue with our society.
That's why we're trying to do also advocacy, right? Where scientists are trying to reach out to decision makers to tell what are the importance, what we can do on our part, but what they can do on their part, right? And on that note, also, I have a question for you, which is maybe an allegation of the Christian question. I heard there are some research going on plants that can survive in drought. Is this correct, or is this how is the research going in this field of plant genetics?
I'm sorry. Could you say that question again? Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. So my question was just about the plant. Like I heard that they're working on plants that are resistant to drought, right? They're like seeds that can be resistant to drought and so on. So could that be one of the possible solutions for countries that are facing drought, like Africa, or that country the drought is so severe that it would be hard to design to actually introduce the transgenic plant that is so resistant to drought? Or like, is there some kind of like a borderline of the droughtness that plant can still survive and that you can genetically modify plant to survive in drought?
I mean, you can modify it only so much. It's kind of what you were talking about earlier. If it's such an extreme drought that it's essentially, a completely different environment, it's not going to work. But you can modify. Like, it also goes back to points like you can use transgenics, and maybe that's a great fix, or it improves yield, or it improves resistance. But a lot of the things that I know, a lot of plant breeders, and plant breeders like to make fun of molecular biologists like us. And the reason for that is because they're essentially doing this already. They are breeding plants in these environments over the course of, they do it the slow old fashioned way. And they try to, and that actually makes a very optimal plant for that area. And based from that foothold, then we can come in maybe as plant geneticists, make transgenics that make it even better. So we kind of rely, again, this goes back to, you can't grow everything everywhere, and especially when we're considering that sometimes that land can't be farmed. And the real tragedy is that's just going to get more and more common. And the bigger tragedy is that's going to happen in places that are already probably really hard hit. And so kind of going back to what Danny said about food distribution and trying to make, the considerations that go into play for that, for the economics and other things, we can only do so much. And I think that kind of goes with that.
I think I totally agree with you, Nick. This is like beyond us, but there are a few things that we can do to help. For instance, what you said, to try to get crops that are more resilient in those climates. But some of the other things that you've mentioned before, for instance, indoor farming, this is a good alternative for places where the climate or the water availability is hard, right? So there are other things that we can do. We don't necessarily have to rely on plants out in the field, right? There's a lot of work being done to optimize growing stuff indoors. So there's for sure one thing that could be explored in those places that are under severe drought.
Right, you are right.
And that's also the reason why my lychee plant, as I said in the beginning, didn't grow in Slovenia, I guess. It's just not optimal. But that's great. Thank you so much for all these questions and answers. I actually have two more here, but I think we kind of touched those two in our discussion just right now. So I think that they are both related to how can we basically manage the effects of climate change on overcome the hunger of our society or the economic impact. But I think that us as scientists, unfortunately, we don't possess that power to do so. We can only inform people about what we know, what is our knowledge, but the decision makers are going to make the decisions. However, I think that we must, as Dan said before, I really like the way how she phrased it, that as scientists, we have to be aware of communicating our messages better. At the same time, we all need to know that this is not our primary job, right? Our primary job is being in the lab and work science, and on top of that, get grants, and on top of that, get all the other stuff. So we are already quite busy with a lot of other stuff. And besides, on top of that, we'll have to do also science communication. It gets a lot on our shoulders. So we have to have more people involved in helping us to communicate the science or in any other way. So these messages can be echoed to the society. So I'm definitely engaging, or let's say challenging everyone to come and join us, and basically to help spread the informations that are true, right, truthful, and that are not how should I say, that are based on the real science and that are credible. So thank you so much. If anyone has any last question, please go ahead. Otherwise, I'm gonna conclude this workshop. And anyone? No? Oh, Christian has perfect. Yes. Go ahead, please join us.
Thank you again. Thank you again. I wanted to ask, do we have on some plant species that can grow like in many conditions, and if yes, how can we expect the quality of those plants, like in different environments? How can we ensure the quality of those various species of plants that have been grown in different environments?
So you mean just to clarify, there are a lot of plants that can grow in pretty varied conditions, but you're asking how do we assure that the quality of those, how can we make sure that the quality of the, like say the grain that's being produced is consistent and good, like in all those types of conditions?
I was like asking if there is this types of or species of plants that can grow in various landscapes, and if so, if we have those plants, how do we assure the quality of the modification of their modification to have like more offspring?
Okay. I mean, there are plants that can grow in pretty different conditions. I mean, we grow them right now. So there's lots of types of grasses that feed lots of people, and they can be grown in dry places or wet places, and different kinds of soil and different kinds of temperature fluctuations. As an example, I'm sure there's others as well. In terms of, but you bring up a good point. I think maybe we touched on this earlier, but when you're transplanting these types of transgenics, let's say you make a transgenic, you're not certain if it's going to behave the same. Say if we plant it in a very arid landscape, like maybe in my case, in certain parts of Texas, it might behave differently if we plant it up, at a northern latitude like we are here in New York, because the light's slightly different, the temperature is different. Even things like wind can actually affect how plants grow in developmental cycles because it's a type of stress. So the way that you ensure that it works in those different conditions is you have to grow it there, and you have to actually check it, because you don't really know until you put it in there and you do those field tests. That's why a lot of seed companies, when they're making up a new transgenic plant, and again, there's issues with this, but they have fields that are all over the world. And if they want to see if they want to sell it in that area, they'll grow it up there to see if it behaves the way that they anticipate it would. So you have to just kind of put it out there and see if it works. And a lot of the times it doesn't. Sometimes it does.
But I would say as well that other stuff like the flavor or the nutritional content will vary depending on where you're planting, because if the soil is more acidic, or if, as Nick said, you have more sunlight, more wind, or whatever, even if the plant grows well, not necessarily your product will be the same in different parts of the world, right? I love giving examples from Brazil, like Brazilian coffee. You can get the same variety depending on where you plant it in Brazil. The flavor will be completely different. And people, I have a great friend that chooses the exact place in Brazil where she buys her beans from, because she likes the taste of stuff that grows there, but not in other parts of the world, even if it's the same variety of coffee. So it will never be exactly the same because the places are different. But you can have good production.
Great, yeah, thank you. Well, thank you so much. And on this note, then we will, let's say, conclude this workshop. So we had a great discussion with Dani and Nick about plant genetics and for the, let's say, sustainable development goals. And I think we will post this on YouTube also. And if you have any further questions, please send email to Girls in Science for SDGs, and we will pass it on to Dani and Nick, and they can answer you. So yeah, thank you so much again, everyone, to come, and have a lovely weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.